What's up everyone? In this video I'm going to talk about the Nikon D3000 and see if it's still good in 2024. And yes, it is still a very capable camera. It's 2024 and this makes the Nikon D3000 a 15-year-old camera. Is it still a very capable camera? Yes. Is it good for portraits? Yes. And it's still good for many other types of photography too. In this video, I'm going to go through why I still use this camera and some tips that will hopefully help you use your Nikon D3000 too. Quick specs on this camera: it has a 10 megapixel CCD crop sensor, it has a 3-inch LCD screen, it has 11 autofocus points, the ISO ranges from 100 to 1600, and a boost up to 3200. It shoots at 3 FPS. That's very fast, well, especially back in this day. And it only has one card slot. And just going to one of the good things I really like about this camera is that it's cheap. I bought this camera at my local camera shop during their used sales event for $60 I think, or $70. You can find a bunch online for about under $100 shipped or under $125 shipped. I wouldn't buy it for $150 unless it's a very low shutter count, but just be wary of certain sellers and make sure that seller is legit. Another great thing I like about this camera is the image quality it produces, especially having enough light, or if you're shooting golden hour, which I would suggest to take photos during. Even with the 18-55 lens on it, it will still produce really great colors and contrast. And this goes for every camera. If you put a decent lens on it like the 51.8G, you'll definitely see the image quality improve. Another thing I like about this camera is the weight and size. It replaced the Nikon D40 and the D60. It's actually the same size as the Nikon D60, which is nice because it's really lightweight and it's pretty portable too. And another great reason why I really like this camera is that it's user friendly, especially for new beginners or someone that just wants to get into photography. There aren't a lot of buttons that won't overwhelm you, so it's definitely going to be very helpful for new photographers. And just going to the bad stuff, it's not really bad, it's more of me just nitpicking. There is no Bluetooth or Wi-Fi built in. There is no video recording capability, so it does not have a video recording mode. The D3000 is the only one in the D3000 family that does not do video recording. There is no image stabilization, and it only has one memory card slot. And like I said earlier, that's just me nitpicking on the D3000. I know that some users will say that the ISO is pretty bad, especially when you go above 1000 ISO. If anyone's out there that still has this camera, people have told me the D3000 CCD sensor does give you that film-like grain, which is really nice depending on your style of photography. So how do you adjust the ISO on this camera? If you'd like to change the ISO on the D3000, there is a way to make this button be the ISO button. Switching your ISO on the go is key to getting better images, just because you don't want that grain to make your images blurry. And especially if you want more clearer images, control your ISO. Another important way to get great images from this camera is to learn its autofocus modes. So what are the autofocus modes and when should you use it? This camera has 4 autofocus modes. It's single servo, which is AFS. This will focus on the subject and you can pose your shot. So whatever you're focused on, it will not autofocus unless you let go of the shutter release button. This is great if you want to compose your shot, but don't move too much around because it's going to lose focus. The next autofocus mode is continuous servo, which is AFC. This mode will constantly keep focusing on your subject. In AFC mode, it's excellent for keeping focus on a moving subject. It's what I would change my mode to, especially if you're doing sports photography, because if subject is moving, it's always going to be continuously focusing on that subject wherever it's moving. The next autofocus mode is AFA. In this mode, the camera will pick and choose what to focus on. This is why it's really important to know what focus mode you're using, so that way you're not losing focus on the subject you're taking pictures of. And manual focus is self-explanatory. It's manual focus. You just have to manually focus. And like I said earlier, once you understand these modes, you'll definitely see improvement on your images. But for sure, use a mode that benefits your type of photography too. And just remember, like I said, just a quick run through, single servo is great for portraits if you like to move around and change its composition. Continuous or AFC is great for sports or fast moving subjects. AFA will let the camera autofocus on what it thinks is most important. And have you ever noticed that if you take a picture, your image is either too green, a little bit too yellow, or a bit too blue? Chances are is that your white balance is off. I don't mean by it's turned off, I just mean that it's off balance. That's why it's called white balance. And here's how you can change the white balance on this camera. As you can see here, it'll show you too, like here, the white balance is auto. I actually usually have it at auto. Then you have like indoor light, fluorescent light, outdoors, flash, cloudy days, because it can really vary. Outdoor shadows, and then a preset, which is, you know, it just automatically presets to your settings. Usually I just have mine in autos, just because I can choose to, you know, do different photography, but when I'm in Lightroom and such, I can change the color balance in Lightroom. So I don't really use the white balance unless it's a very consistent color. Like as you can see here, this is more orange. So if you want more of a blue, you can change the white balance to more blue. And then this light right here is actually giving off more of like a blue color versus two. So this right here, this color is giving out more of a blue, and obviously from here you can see that it's giving out more of an orange. So this is what can really help you with your white balance. So if you control your white balance for these lights to be more cool blue, you can change that in your camera as well. Auto. So what auto will do is it will automatically adjust. So if those lights like right here are too orange, let's go to opposite and do blue and see how that comes out. Adjust here. Once you choose the correct setting, it should help alleviate the really strong light color for whatever room or area you're in. And now you may have heard about JPEG versus RAW. I'll explain the differences and which one you should use. Personally, I love using RAW plus B, which is basic. That way I have the RAW files and the JPEGs. But the difference between RAW and JPEG is making your images look like this and making your image look like this. JPEG is an uncompressed photo with less detail and better for easy sharing. RAW is uncompressed with more detail. You'll also get more flexibility with editing as well. And when I first started, I was just shooting JPEG too. It's not an issue, but once you get the hang of it, or once you really get serious with photography, RAW is the way to go, especially if you really want your image to pop. So let me know in the comments what you prefer and where you're at with your photography journey. And another great thing I like about this D3000 too is how it shows you the exposure compensation like this. It's really nice because you can see how much it affects during daylights or reflections too. And another important factor that could be affecting the way your images look could be the metering mode you're using. The D3000 only has this mode in PSAM. PSAM is program, shutter, aperture, and manual. In auto mode, it automatically goes to matrix metering, and that mode will give you the most natural results. You can press the question mark button to really understand which metering mode best fits your photography style. And I'll just explain pretty quickly what the D3000's different metering modes are. The D3000 has matrix, center weighted, and spot. Matrix metering will automatically adjust the image as best as it can. Center weighted, this meters the entire frame but assigns the greatest weight to center area. This is great for portraits or if anything that's very strong in contrast like cars. The next one is spot. This meters the current focus point. Personally, I like using spot for portraits. This makes sure the subject is properly exposed. So yes, metering is pretty important if you're doing landscapes or working with a tough lighting situation. Like I said earlier, you can press on the question mark button and just read which meter mode really suits your kind of photography. So if you ever notice the PSAM on the dial, P stands for program, S stands for shutter, A stands for aperture, and M is manual mode. But in program mode, you get more freedom to choose what kind of settings you want. Here's the difference between program mode and the menu setting, and here's how it looks like in auto mode. And in program mode, obviously you can see how much more things you can select. And if you're in shutter mode, you control the shutter and the camera will make adjustments to the shutter you choose. So if you want to capture movement, shutter mode is where you want to create motion or freeze the motion. So if you're switching the shutter, the camera will automatically adjust the aperture depending on what you want. In aperture mode, you can control the aperture. If you have the 18 to 55, the aperture will change depending on which focal length you're using, like this. But if you have a lens like the 17 to 50 2.8, you can stay at f2.8 at all focal lengths. This is why so many people recommend the 2.8 zoom lenses. I have a review of my Tamron 17 to 50 on my channel, so check that out when you can. I would definitely highly suggest it for a beginner, especially since the Tamron 17-50 is fairly cheap now too. I'll have a description below on where you can purchase it. And then going to manual mode, it speaks for itself. You choose the settings, you can change the aperture, you can change the shutter speed and the ISO to make it fit the photography style you want. And I think learning manual mode is really just key to getting the most out of this camera too. Once you understand and learn how to use manual mode, you'll just see how powerful the D3000 is. So what lenses are compatible with the D3000 and what is the best lens for it? Unfortunately, there are no best lenses for the D3000 because it just really depends on your style of photography. I would suggest a 51.8G for a new photographer, but I feel like that lens is pretty advanced for new photographers just because you're stuck on one focal length. That's why I recommend the 17 to 50 because you have a wider range of a focal length to move around with. And plus you have the f2.8 aperture to play with too. And again, there are no best lenses for the D3000 because it just really depends on the photography you're doing and what your style is. And also the D3000 does not have a AF screw drive. So you won't be able to utilize the autofocus in the older AFD lenses. So for example, if you have the f1.8D lens, you can mount it on the D3000, but it will not autofocus because the f1.8D lens has the AF screw, and you need the AF screw drive on your camera to autofocus with the AFD lenses. So the D3000 does not have an AF screw. You can just easily check because it doesn't have the AF screw drive like the D7000 does or the D90. So is the Nikon D3000 still a good camera in 2024? I would say yes, it is still a very capable camera. And when you attach a nice lens to it, you'll get amazing images with it. Yeah, it doesn't have Bluetooth or video recording, but this is what makes the D3000 so nice because it's a photographer's camera. I've done portraits with the Nikon D3000, so you can check that out on my video channel too. And if you're doing portraits on a budget, I'd highly recommend the 35 1.8 GDX. Usually you can find one for under $125 shipped, or if you're lucky, you can probably find one locally around you if you're in the cities or somewhere close to the cities. Someone's probably selling it for $100 if you're lucky. Just make sure the lens is in good shape. Personally, I always recommend used lenses just because if you're just, testing waters with your camera and you want to test out different lenses, it's better off to spend money on used lenses versus a brand new, because most of the time those used lenses are still in great condition. So you're basically getting a fairly decent lens for a lot cheaper versus brand new. And I'm just sharing this information just because, especially if someone's new, you don't want to spend like $300, $400 on a brand new lens when you can find it for like $100. For example, the 51.8G is like $225 brand new, but you can find it online for like under $150 shipped, depending on the condition it's in. So get a decent lens with a D3000 and you'll definitely see your images improve in quality. But also understand how the D3000 functions with its different settings, and you will eventually get images you want from it. And I know the cost of the new cameras and new used cameras are going up now, and a lot of photographers are recommending newer cameras that are obviously out of some people's budget. So just letting you, the viewer, know that the D3000 is still a very solid camera in 2024. So if you have a D3000 or you plan on getting one, please leave a comment. And if you've gotten this far, seriously, I appreciate you watching, and I really hope this video helped you. And if you have anyone that's interested in the D3000, feel free to share this video with them too, because I'm definitely doing more videos with the D3000 and all the rest of my older DSLRs, just because, like I said earlier, new cameras are just so expensive now, and it's no issues going back to the DSLRs, especially if you're on a tight budget. Let me know in the comments how much you bought your D3000 for, and if you have had a D3000, let me know what you think about it. If you can please hit that like button and subscribe, it would really help my channel too. I just want to say thanks for watching. I really appreciate you commenting and everyone else that's been subscribing. It's been very motivational for me to make these kinds of videos. So again, thanks for watching and see ya.